Do you see my presentation?
Yes.
Okay, great. 1 minute. Well, as the first thing I would like to share is all about wartime communication, and the topic sounds like evolution of wartime communication models in a diachronic perspective through the lens of macro-linguopolitical synergetics. And the aim of my study is to explain wartime communication and its two types in different discourses. First of all, it's official, then publicistic and artistic, as well as within three historical periods, the First and the Second World Wars, and the ongoing Russian-Ukrainian War. Well, I have the extended methodology, and the research is based on the corpus that includes newspaper publications, as well as journalistic books like Christopher Miller and Bob Woodward, as well as artistic books including Eric Maria Remarque, Primo Levi, Tolkien, Anna Frank, and Matt Gallagher and Arthur Dražek. And also, my research includes different methods. First of all, it's important to talk about historical method. And what is important is that on the first stage of the study, I utilized the historical method. And the aim is at understanding the nature of wartime communication through the analysis of origins and transformations across different historical periods. The second method is descriptive analytical method, and at this stage, the specific features of both types of wartime communication were analyzed in text with different functional and stylistic marking from the period of World War One. The third method was a comprehensive approach, historical documentary and discourse analytical methods. So on this stage, it was also important in order to clarify the specific features of wartime communication during the Second World War, and comprehensive approach was used combining historical documentary and discourse analytical methods. And discursive analysis is actually the last method I will propose you. This is the first stage of the study and is based on discursive analysis of official journalistic and literary texts and applies a linguistical approach to identify the specific features of wartime communication in the context of ongoing Russian-Ukrainian war. And going back to findings and discussion, analyzing wartime communication in text with different functional and stylistic markings makes it possible to identify the ideological positions of state authorities, military actors, civilians, international organizations, allies, and writers. In view of this, it is important to recognize that wartime communication in official and journalistic styles differs substantially from its manifestation in artistic discourse. Accordingly, in line with the objectives of the study, we will first examine the specific features of wartime communication in official and publicistic texts, and then proceed to the analysis of its implementation in artistic materials. And I propose you the statement of wartime communication. So this is a process of exchanging information in wartime conditions between military structures, civilians, and government institutions using both verbal and non-verbal means, while taking into account the specific features of war language. And depending on the nature of the interaction, wartime communication can be classified into two main types: domestic policy wartime communication and foreign policy wartime communication. And I will make the difference between them because it's actually the difference is significant. So, first of all, domestic policy wartime communication is a process of organizing effective information exchange within a state, which in times of crisis takes on an emergency form and performs the function of operational response to emergency situation. And first of all, I will propose some examples and maybe very significant extracts according to the First World War. Historical experience confirms that importance of an established system of communication between the state and society during wartime, but also demonstrates its reverse side. As the New York Times journalists Hamilton and Kossar note, within World War I in the United States, a comprehensive program of government propaganda took shape. The Committee on Public Information, established by the President Woodward Wilson through executive order on April 14, 1917. And in this actually document, I have noticed that the important extract that I'm present in this slide is that the committee was headed by journalist George Creel, considered President Woodward Wilson personal Bannon for his active role in shaping government information policy during the war. Creel's approach was characterized by emotional pressure and often coercive tactics. As Creel in 1920 noted, you see the extras. There was no part of the Great War machinery that we didn't touch, no medium of appeal that we didn't employ. So, official support of this activity is shown in the archival document of United States Committee on Public Information Woodrow Wilson collection in 1918. And the activities of the Committee on the Public Information, in which President Wilson expressed his approval of Creel's work and the committee's mission. In this letter to George Creel, Wilson wrote, and you see the extract from archival document. In the given example, a linguistic model of behavior of agents of wartime communication is traced, which is based on total coverage of the information space. Agents of wartime communication should be understood as specific individuals or institutions that actively shape their disseminate communication messages during wartime in order to influence public opinion and ensure support for a coordinated state policy. And in this statement, fragment two, this it illustrates cognitive exploration in which the mediator in terms the state authority through rhetorical affirmation, emotional reinforcement, and strategic forecasting influences the recipient in terms of the communication agent, embedding their consciousness the idea of the strategic importance of informational activity. And this type of discourse fosters cognitive consolidation of the subject and ensures coherence within the state's communicatively hierarchy. We consider wartime communication in the literary text as a specific dimension of literary communication built on the basis of one-way interaction between the author of war prose and the reader. And in this aspect, it's important to notice that a domestic policy wartime communication is an aesthetically mediated dialogue within the epistemological paradigm between the author, who articulates a certain military harmonistic horizon of war, and the reader, who interprets this experience through the lens of ontological identity. And I will propose you the example based on a remark novel, All Quiet on the Western Front. And you see the extract here. In this instance, a communication simultaneously conveys meaning and articulates the existential despair that defines the status of the subject of war. The author acts as a barrier of experience, forming a communicative channel between the reality of war and the reader's receptive consciousness, transmitting events through the lens of inner world transformed by war. And I also propose another type of wartime communication, and this is a foreign policy wartime communication. And example, one of the example I will propose you based on the during the First World War. This is a process of organizing effective information exchange in different spheres. First of all, in terms of economic sphere, security, scientific and technology, environmental sphere, cultural sphere, and humanitarian sphere as well. Uh, this principle of foreign policy wartime communication uh, can be found in can be reflected in the Covenant of the League of Nations, reflected in the Avalon Project. And here is some appropriate extract from the archival document of League of Nations. In this text fragment, as a linguistic expression undertake to interchange full and frank information functions as a verbal act of commitment framed as a collective agreement. It serves as a political tool of mutual trust and fosters open dialogue. Such a construction contributes to strengthening international oversight and preventing a conflict by removing information barriers. Lexical units from the military register, scale of the armaments, their military, naval, and air programs specify the object of potential threat, which in the context of foreign policy wartime communication becomes subject of a coordinated interstate monitoring. And in this slide, you also see the statement that is due to artistic texts, artistic discourse, and the foreign policy wartime communication differs in different types of discourse, as that I have mentioned on the very beginning of my presentation. Here you can find the extract from Tolkien, The Lord of the Ring, and here's a very appropriate example of foreign policy wartime communication. An illustrative example of this type of communication can be found actually in this short fragment of text. The speech delivered by Saruman, the chief of the Istari, order and head of the White Council, who betrayed his mission and sought to form of alliance with Sauron to gain personal power, demonstrates how foreign policy wartime communication unfolds within the fictional narrative structure. In this episode, instead of direct depiction of armed confrontation, the focus shifts to an institutionalized and linguistically substantial strategy for forming a political alliance. This strategy represents an alternative model of geopolitical interaction within an imagined world. And I'll also present you domestic policy wartime communication during World War II. Here you can find the example of historical experience of the United Kingdom during the World War II, and it demonstrates the effectiveness of the domestic wartime communication system. According to the National Archive, 1944, we can observe this type of communication, which is important in line of operational interaction. In this example, line 6, uh, in this example, verbal instruments of legitimizing power under a state of emergency include institutionalized vocabulary. The phrase the machine of government serves as a technocratic metaphor, transforming the traditional concept of the state as an institution into the image of an impersonal, powerful, and a coordinated system. This is a typical rhetorical device of centralized discourse. The state doesn't merely act, it functions as a machine operating efficiently. And also, it can be found that domestic policy wartime communication also is presented in Primo Levi book, If This Is a Man. And here you can find an example from this actually very important book. Um, in the field of linguopolitical synergetics, the anthropocentric model of wartime communication represents a conceptual form of literary representation in which war is interpreted through the prism of existential human experience, marked by self-awareness and the capacity of ethical reflection, in contrast to models rooted in military political doctrine. The textual fragment reveals the linguistic mechanisms of resistance to dehumanization within the space of domestic communication. Levi's text functions as aesthetically mediated dialogue between author and reader, articulating the traumatic experience of war in symbolic form. For instance, the phrase "to remain alive," not to begin to die, expresses a position of resistance. In that vein, domestic wartime communication is a verbal act of conceptual critique of the regime of violence. And foreign policy wartime communication during World War II. Well, the chapter of the Soviet Union occupies the Baltic states, archive document 1940. Here is very bright example from this archive document. In the text of this extract, we identify foreign policy wartime communication, which consists of a political decision, demand to change the government, projection of military power, occupation of territories by the Red Army, and media mediation documentation of the event. This configuration enables international actors to promptly assess the situation, determine its legal and security status. In Anna Frank's diary of a young girl, wartime communication is veiled in the text and transitions into a broader narrative through the lens of emotional involvement. In this fragment, we observe an emotionally charged narrative interpretation of Allied military actions reflected in the following lexemes. Invasion denotes the military operation of the Allied forces, particularly the Normandy landing, D-Day. Within the literary context, the military term undergoes a semantic shift from a negative connotation to a positive symbolic liberation. France, an emotionally colored euphemism that metaphorically represents the Allied nations as friendly forces and a source of hope. Then talking about Ukrainian ongoing Russian-Ukrainian war, in the excerpt from Christopher Miller's book, "The War Came to Us: Life and Death in Ukraine," in chapter 31, it is revealed that domestic wartime communication serves as a tool for national unity and a political self-assertion. at a moment of historical turning point. In this fragment, a striking intertextual insertion is the reference to the film Independence Day and the speech of its character, President Thomas Whitmore, which established a media cultural parallel while simultaneously transporting political reality into the realm of collective imagination. This illusion renders the message more accessible to a broader audience. And serves the function of symbolic heroism. The image employed appeals to a cultural archetype of resistance to evil, particularly through the phrase fighting for our right to live, to exist, which grants moral and political legitimacy to armed resistance. Zelensky statement, we have to stand and fight or there will be nothing left, serves as an example of the imperative of unity. The use of model construction expressing obligation, how to stand and fight, combined with the warning about consequences, nothing left, creates a sense of urgency actively to opposition, life construction. And in another example is the book is Matt Gallagher's book Daybreak. It's also about events in Ukraine. And here, domestic policy wartime communication unfolds through the convergence of infrastructural, religious, emotional, and semiotic interaction between the individual and society. The artistic discourse shows that humanitarian dimension of war, on one hand, it depicts the struggle for territory. On the other, it reveals the manifestation of human inner resilience and effective involvement of the civilians in the realities of war is conveyed through an institutional signal, the voice from loudspeakers, which symbolizes centralized control. The phrase reminding of the national blackout signifies a communicative act within the state society diet. And I have the lack of time. And one more example, and maybe it will be the last one. So this is the book of Bob Woodward, War. And this is a typical in this fragment of text. You may see a typical role-playing game that develops within the framework of foreign policy wartime communication, where political actors implement institutionally established scenarios of achieving peace, employ rhetorical appeals to historical memory and the necessity of a strategic partnership. The political scenario evolves in Lindsey Graham's performance of the role of mediator who tries to convey the pro-Ukrainian position in form acceptable to Donald Trump, while maintaining a balance between foreign support and domestic political interests. Graham structures his communicative strategy employing arguments grounded on historical parallels, including, the last guy that did this wound up getting the world in a big war, an allusion to Hitler's as a tool to influence through the memory of a world tragedy. And what about conclusions? 1 minute. This is important to talk about theoretical and practical foundations of the study of wartime communication that is based on linguopolitical synergetics. And this is a new branch that I proposed in my doctoral thesis. And the major breakthrough is made by revealing two key types of wartime communication, domestic and foreign policy wartime communication in text of different discourses, official discourse, publicistic discourse, and artistic discourse within three historical periods. And What is important from comparing three periods, at the time of Russian-Ukrainian war, domestic policy wartime communication is manifested through administrative mechanisms that ensure strategic governance and societal consolidation. It's implemented through linguistic means that reflect the core functions of the state under marital law, mainly administrative governments of vocabulary with a focus on military political terms and security policy. And here is the references that I used to perform this research. Thank you for your attention.